where the story really began. You don't always realize when your story begins. Sometimes it doesn't start with a milestone. It starts with a silence, a missing hand, a door closing behind someone who never comes back. My story began when I was 3, the day my father left. That's the first memory that lives in my bones. My mom and dad had what people called young love. High school sweethearts, smart, educated, the kind of couple you root for. They went to college, built a life, had a child, me. It looked picture perfect from the outside, but perfect doesn't always last. He left, and no one really explained why. And that's the moment, right there, when the child version of me picked up a pen in her soul and began to write a story. Not the truth of what happened, but the meaning I made of it. If he left, it must mean I wasn't enough. If he loved me, he would have stayed. Maybe I was too much. Maybe I broke something. Children don't have the emotional vocabulary or psychological development to separate what happened from what it means about them. So when love disappears, we don't think something is wrong with them. We think something must be wrong with me. And that belief becomes the blueprint. It lives in the unconscious. It shapes our friendships, our faith, our identity. It whispers in the background of every relationship. Don't get too close. People leave. Don't expect too much. You'll be disappointed. Be good. Be quiet. Be helpful. Maybe then they'll stay. This is how codependency begins. Not with adult relationships, but in childhood, when the need for love outweighs the right to truth. When a child's heart is faced with abandonment or betrayal, she often chooses loyalty over reality, because the truth is too painful. When protection is a fantasy. My mom remarried not long after. Her new husband was handsome, a veterinarian, charming in that intelligent, sarcastic, cool adult way. He had an edge to him, something that made people laugh and lean in. But to me, he was terrifying. He said things that no child should hear. Sexualized jokes, whispered warnings, inappropriate comments that made my body tense. He touched me in ways that seemed subtle, brushed against me, stood too close, lingered too long. But I knew. My body knew. And when I tried to speak up, my mom dismissed it. She always took his side. I learned very quickly that telling the truth made me the problem, that the cost of being honest was rejection. So I silenced myself. And that silence became survival. You see, when the person who's supposed to protect you becomes the person who scares you, and the one who should listen to you chooses not to, you begin to believe that your pain must be wrong, that your perception must be off, that your instincts are dangerous. This is where self-betrayal is born. When a child is forced to choose between the truth she feels and the love she needs, she will almost always choose love, even if it means lying to herself, even if it means writing a story that says, maybe I misunderstood, maybe I was too dramatic, maybe if I just act right, they'll love me back. And that belief, if I behave the right way, I can control whether or not people love me. That's codependency in its earliest form. Making them right, so I can feel safe. We don't just create these stories to survive the moment. We carry them into every room we walk into. Because for many of us, the most dangerous belief isn't just that we're unworthy. It's that we need to protect the people who hurt us. Why? Because if we can make our parents right, then the world still feels safe. If I can convince myself, Mom didn't ignore me. She just had a lot on her plate. He didn't mean to scare me. I probably misunderstood. Then I don't have to face the unbearable truth that the people who were supposed to love me didn't protect me. And here's where the gospel meets us. Jesus never asks us to protect the people who harmed us. He says, the truth will set you free. Not pretending, not perfection, truth. But I wasn't ready for truth yet. I was still chasing the story where if I worked hard enough, stayed quiet enough, performed well enough, I could finally feel loved. So I chased safety in the only way I knew, through control, through being the good kid, through trying to fix myself instead of questioning what was happening around me. The girl who disappeared to be seen. By the time I reached adolescence, I had already learned how to disappear. We moved constantly. Every time I found a rhythm, a friend group, a passion, a team, I was pulled away. Soccer, dance, even my best friend, gone in a flash. And I told myself, it's fine. Because I'd learned early, if you want to survive, don't get attached. But every time something I loved was taken away, another quiet message was written in my body. Nothing good lasts. Don't get too comfortable. You don't get to choose what stays. At school, I struggled. Not because I wasn't intelligent, but because I was always starting over. Different states, different curriculums, different expectations. And soon teachers began labeling me. Not as hurt, not as grieving, just slow. And I believed them. Because when adults label a child, that label can stick deeper than truth, especially when no one speaks a better word. At home, things were no better. My stepdad, the third man in the line of father figures, was a police officer. Stoic, angry, unyielding. He never said, "I love you." He never apologized. He raged. And when he did, I'd retreat to my room, put on headphones, and crank the volume to drown him out. Music was my refuge. Writing was my lifeline. Those were the only places where my emotions felt safe enough to be heard. But even in those quiet spaces, I was still performing. Performing goodness. Performing competence. Performing fine, because my worth was never affirmed unless it was earned. We had money. We had animals, land, business opportunities. From the outside, it looked like I had everything. But inside, I was a ghost of a girl. And when you grow up in a house that only praises your productivity, never your personhood, you learn that being loved means being useful. So I stayed busy, I chased achievement, I won awards in FFA, ran successful little businesses, impressed adults. But I was starving for affection, for approval, for someone to look at me and say, "You don't have to prove anything. I just love you." That moment never came. And so I worked harder. That's what children do when their emotional needs are unmet. They become high achievers or caretakers, hoping someone will finally see their effort as enough. But inside, my heart was becoming more and more disconnected from my body. I learned to ignore my gut, dismiss my fear, suppress my needs, because feeling was dangerous, and asking for something always came with a cost. The fire that felt like love. At 19, I ran. Not toward freedom, but toward familiarity dressed in new clothes. I was done living under my parents' thumb, tired of being controlled, tired of having every decision scrutinized. So I left, moved to Seattle with a suitcase full of hope, fear, and the hidden belief that maybe, just maybe, I could start over. But I didn't start over. I repeated the pattern. I fell in love with a man who was everything my childhood wasn't: spontaneous, charismatic, passionate, wild. He drank too much, talked too fast, loved with intensity. And at first, I mistook that intensity for safety, because when you've grown up ignored, controlled, and dismissed, even chaos feels like connection. He swept me off my feet, complimented my body in ways I never heard at home, told me I was beautiful, that he couldn't live without me. And after years of being invisible, it felt intoxicating to be seen, even if it was by someone unstable. But soon, his charisma turned cruel. The drinking escalated, the mood swings sharpened, the apologies got louder, but the behavior never changed. He hit me, and then held me, told me he was sorry, that it would never happen again, that I made him better. And I stayed. Because deep down, the story I still believed was this: if I just love him well enough, he'll change. If I just stay calm, stay helpful, stay loyal, he'll finally heal. If I leave, it means I failed, and I'm tired of failing. But what I didn't realize then, what trauma had hidden from me, was that I wasn't staying for him. I was staying to avoid myself. Because leaving meant I'd have to face my loneliness, my anger, my grief, the truth about how unloved I had felt for most of my life. It felt easier to fix him than to face me. This is the dark side of codependency. It's not just about controlling others. It's about avoiding yourself by attaching to someone else's pain. Because if I could make him better, maybe I could finally feel worthy. I stayed for 2 years. Through broken promises, through bruised skin, through the illusion that love was supposed to hurt before it healed. Until one night, after a concert, he beat me worse than ever before. And in that moment, something broke. Not just in my body, but in my soul. I left. Not because I was strong, yet, but because I was out of options. I packed my things and walked away, still believing I was broken, but also beginning to wonder if maybe I didn't deserve this after all. I didn't take time to heal. I didn't pause long enough to even ask what I needed. Because when you're raised in dysfunction, rest feels dangerous. Silence feels too loud. And healing feels like failure. So I married again. This time, to a man who didn't raise his voice, didn't hit me, didn't threaten. At first, that was enough. After chaos, even neglect can feel like peace. He was gentle, soft-spoken, reserved, a maintenance man, capable, dependable, on paper. But what I didn't know then is that emotional absence is its own kind of abuse. He struggled with bipolar disorder, something I didn't fully understand at the time. Bipolar isn't just mood swings. It's a cycle of extremes. Manic highs filled with overconfidence, risky decisions, wild ideas, and depressive lows that can last for weeks, even months, where the world feels unlivable and nothing helps. During his highs, he was electric, planning trips, dreaming big, talking nonstop, and I'd get swept into the fantasy. During his lows, he'd crash, refuse to get out of bed, threaten suicide, withdraw from the kids, shut down emotionally and physically. And through it all, I carried the weight. I cooked, cleaned, worked, paid bills, raised our babies, tried to hold space for his pain while burying my own. That's what codependency looks like in marriage. It's not love. It's self-erasure. It's making your partner's well-being your full-time job, while silently disappearing inside your own life. I thought if I could just help him stabilize, if I could be his rock, his cheerleader, his therapist, his reason to get better, then maybe I'd finally feel secure. But the truth is, I never felt seen, and I never felt safe. I walked on eggshells, not from fear of his fists, but from the fear that he'd fall apart if I told the truth. We lived paycheck to paycheck. He refused to work for long stretches. And when I tried to talk about it, he'd spiral, blame me, say I didn't support him, threaten to hurt himself. And every time I set a boundary, he made me feel like I was being cruel. So I let the boundaries fall. Again, and again, and again. Because I believed it was my job to save him, and that if I walked away, it meant I wasn't loving him like Jesus. That's how deeply I had misunderstood the gospel. I had confused self-sacrifice with righteousness. I thought being a good Christian woman meant staying, fixing, absorbing, enduring. But then, I had our second child. And 4 days after giving birth, still bleeding, exhausted, and in pain, he insisted we go on a 10-mile bike ride up a mountain. Not because it was necessary, not because I wanted to, but because he needed control, because my rest was inconvenient for him. And I went. Because I had forgotten I had a choice. But something shifted that day. A quiet voice inside whispered, "This isn't love. This is survival." Later, I shared everything with a trusted pastor. I told him I was scared, tired, confused, and he asked me one simple, searing question. If 20 years from now, nothing has changed, will you be okay with that? And I couldn't answer, because I knew the answer. Number, I wouldn't be okay, and that meant I couldn't stay. I kicked him out, not in rage, not in revenge, but in sacred clarity. Because the woman I used to be, the girl who thought love meant carrying everyone else's pain, was finally waking up. And she was ready to begin again. When it looks like God, but it's control. After all the chaos, I thought I was finally doing it right. I waited this time, prayed, got counseling, told myself I wouldn't settle again. And then I met him. A Christian man, a worship leader, a dad, kind, steady, helpful. He knew all the scriptures. He opened the car door. He asked questions about my heart. We didn't rush. He pursued me gently. We built a friendship, a shared faith, a rhythm. One day, he asked me to marry him. And I thought he was joking. Because somewhere deep down, I still didn't trust myself. But I said yes. Because I wanted to believe that maybe this time, this man was safe. And for a while, he was. We laughed. We served together. Went to church. Raised our kids. We were best friends. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, something shifted. And this time, it wasn't obvious. There were no fists, no shouting, no slammed doors, just distance, deflection, minimized pain. He started drinking again, secretly. I'd find hidden bottles, smell it in the car, hear the slur in his late-night voice. I'd ask. He'd deny. Every time. You're imagining things. Why don't you trust me? You're being paranoid. That's gaslighting, when someone denies your reality so persistently that you begin to question your sanity. And when it's wrapped in Christian language, it becomes spiritual abuse. Because he didn't just deny the drinking, he spiritualized it. God's still working on me. Grace covers all. You're being a nagging wife. And slowly, I began to disappear again. He was a covert narcissist, not loud, not grandiose, not obvious, but quietly manipulative. Always the victim, always trying, but never actually changing. At church, he was a servant. At home, he was withdrawn. Online, he was flirty, especially with women. He emotionally cheated, built private connections, blamed me for not meeting his needs. He was an energy vampire, feeding on attention, praise, admiration. But behind closed doors, he left nothing for me. And when I tried to speak up, people looked at me like I was the problem. Because from the outside, he was perfect, charming, gifted, devoted, and I was exhausted, angry, emotionally undone. But I couldn't prove the harm. There were no bruises, only confusion, silence, loneliness. I started Googling late at night. Why do I feel crazy in my marriage? He's amazing in public but mean in private. I think I'm married to a narcissist. And slowly, the light came on. Covert narcissism, spiritual gaslighting, emotional abandonment. It had a name. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overreacting. I wasn't failing at faith. I was waking up. The betrayal that broke the spell. There's always a final straw. A moment when the fog lifts completely. When you stop making excuses. When you stop hoping the best friend version of him will come back. When you realize he's not coming back. Because he was never really there. For me, it was the night I discovered he had bought drugs, marijuana, for our youngest son, as a Christmas gift, bought behind my back, arranged through secret conversations, hidden from me because they all knew I wouldn't approve. Everyone kept it quiet. My husband, my son. Even people close to us who knew, like my sister and older sons, said, "I don't want to get involved." And that silence, it cut deeper than the betrayal itself. I confronted him. He minimized it, said I was overreacting, said I was making a big deal out of nothing. But it wasn't nothing. It was the final proof that I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't imagining the manipulation, that I wasn't the unstable one. He had crossed the line, not just as a husband, but as a father. And when I spoke to police and lawyers, I was told it wasn't worth pursuing without witnesses. I had no legal case. But I had something else. I had clarity. I left. For the last time. I went back to my parents' house. Yes, the same place where I once felt unseen, unheard, unsafe. But this time, I brought boundaries with me. They hadn't changed. Still emotionally distant. Still transactional. Still more interested in appearances than in connection. But I had changed. I wasn't looking for their approval anymore. I wasn't trying to convince them I was worthy. I didn't need them to rewrite the past. Because I finally realized I could tell the truth, even if they never did. And that's when healing really began. Not the surface kind, but the kind that reaches into your bones and says, "This ends with me." I finally stopped. I wasn't striving to be chosen anymore. I wasn't trying to fix someone else. I wasn't performing faith. I was living it. My home became a place of clarity, of boundaries, of real joy. Not perfect, not polished, but true. And in that stillness, without chaos, without crisis, I felt something I hadn't felt since I was a child. Peace. Not because everything was healed, not because everyone had changed, but because I had. And then, something unexpected happened. My father, the one who left when I was 3, came back into my life. He was clean, sober, present. He didn't make excuses. He didn't try to rewrite the past. He just showed up. Consistently, lovingly, humbly. He became a grandfather, a listener, a man who made room for my grief without defending himself. And I saw with new eyes what real redemption looks like. Not performance, not apologies wrapped in manipulation, but presence. We didn't erase the past. We didn't pretend it didn't hurt. But we healed in truth. And that's what I offer to you today. Because I know what it feels like to question your sanity. To have a marriage that looks picture perfect while your soul is bleeding in secret. To be told that if you just prayed harder, served more, forgave faster, things would get better. But here's what I want you to know. Jesus doesn't ask you to disappear in the name of love. He doesn't call you to lose yourself to save someone else. He never once said, "Stay in abuse so you can be holy." He said, "I came that you might have life and have it to the full." And I'm living that life now. Not because my story is tidy. Not because I got it all right. But because I finally let God tell the truth about my story. I stopped hiding behind religion and started walking in a relationship. I let go of needing to be the fixer, the glue, the good girl, and I let Jesus rebuild me. And now I tell this story, not for pity, but for power. So another woman, sitting alone in her room, Googling late at night, can read these words and think, maybe I'm not crazy. Maybe it's not me. Maybe Jesus is with me even here. To you, sweet sister, I say this. You're not broken. You're becoming. You're not too far gone. You're waking up. And the God who walked me through every fire, every silent scream, every heartbreak, is walking you through yours too. This is not the end. It's the beginning of your exit story. Walk in truth. Walk in faith. Walk free. Jesus already made a way. Now you just get to choose it.